Greetings, brave adventurers. My name is FoxyBard, and that feels so nice to say again. Right, I'm back with, two stories today. They're kind of long, I could only really fit two. But they're not quite as horrific as some other ones. More general RPG snafus. The things that you're more likely to encounter, but hey, we can still learn from them and see where we can do better in our own games. So, let's get right into it. Our first story of the day is by Capt Falco0 and is entitled Player Tries to Play as a Paladin in Cyberpunk Red. Oh, that's supposed to be Captain Falco. You know, whatever, I like Capt Falco0 better. That's funnier to me. Also, paladins aren't in Cyberpunk Red. If you didn't know, you probably did. It's called Cyberpunk. Why would there be paladins? I guess maybe like the name of a security system? That could be cool. Whatever. Tale start. This happened with my regular group about a year ago. Most of these people were people I would also regularly play D&D with on a regular basis. That's what regularly means. It was me, my best friend, two other good friends, and my best friend's friend. Okay, but what about your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate? Are they involved? Our forever DM decided to try something new after years of D&D campaigns, one right after another, so we tried playing Cyberpunk Red. I rolled up a cop. Why do I suddenly want bacon? My best friend rolled up a corpo, my other two friends were all solos, and then my best friend's friend said, "I am gonna play a paladin who worships a mysterious yet ever-present god of justice named Tholor. I will be taking the oath of the Crusader." DM then just said, "Sorry, bro, there's no paladins in Night City." He then said, "What do you mean there are no paladins? That makes no effing sense." DM then said, "This is a futuristic city that exists in the real world. Well, sort of. There is no magic or anything like what D&D Paladin would have. Nor would there be a Tholor." He then said, "Fine, I'll worship Cyber Jesus or something, but no way would there not be one paladin in Cyberpunk. Come on, not one zealous believer who would fight for his faith." Man, in the modern day, religious psychos who fight for their faith or whatever are not seen in a very good light. DM then tried to show him the roles that actually existed for the system, but he was just so dead set on playing a paladin, and DM eventually relented and said, "Fine, call yourself a paladin, but he is not gonna play like a D&D paladin. You're basically gonna play like a rocker boy with a couple of twinks." That says tweaks, not twinks. I'm leaving that in. He then tried to argue that he should have spells and that people around him would just think they're miracles or some kind of high-tech trick, but DM refused. Sort of. What do you mean, sort of? The tweaks to the Rocker Boy role included more connections to churches and their followers rather than fans, and his preaching rather than his music would inspire people to his cause. I actually kinda like that. That's very similar. No, that's not bad. That's pretty good. He also would get badass cybernetic armor and cybernetics and guns that could at least somewhat mimic the D&D paladin powers he wanted. Okay. That's, I think, where you lose me, especially if he's starting the game with all that. Our first mission was light. It involved us basically hunting down and apprehending a shady netrunner before he hops onto the net. We were supposed to return him to the Fixer, an undercover cop, for questioning. Once we apprehended him, he said, "I cast Thunderous Smite on this degenerate." DM reminded him that Thunderous Smite wasn't a thing in this world and that his role, weapon, and cybernetic perks were meant to mimic a paladin's powers. He said,
Fine, I just use my plasma lightning pistol to blow his brains out in the name of God.
The rest of us just kind of groaned, as we weren't supposed to actually kill him, but just moved on. Some people need to be told no, at least once in their life. Jeez. The next few sessions involved him embracing this holy murder hobo paladin archetype, as he would find righteous excuses to kill NPCs left and right, and do it more and more like a D&D paladin as he accumulated more gear and weapons. Every character where he has even a 0.1% plausible justification to kill, that is, criminals, shady fixers, corpos, etc., and he'd take it, usually using some thunder-based gun or cybernetic to do it, and then justifying it with his character's crusader mentality. Man, the only people who are crusaders in the modern day, or call them that, are not people you want to associate yourself with, my guy. Oh. A good example would be when we met this corpo enforcer from Biotechnica who wanted our help finding a stolen family heirloom. The corpo had a shady past and present, but had a side to him that we empathized with him. Except for Paladin, who was convinced it was some sort of sketchy gadget. Nevertheless, we helped him find the heirloom, gave it to him, and received our reward. Then our Paladin said,
I still don't trust you.
And he said, excuse me? And he said, well, the Paladin said,
You heard me, suit. I know who you work for, and I don't think this is any ordinary heirloom.
We tell him to cool it, but the argument escalates as he is basically interrogating him about every effed up thing he has ever done as a Biotechnica enforcer. Eventually, he is demanding the heirloom back while refusing to return the payment. When the corpo obviously says no, he just decides to shoot him and claim,
I had no choice. He was evil.
I'm actually kind of starting to think that maybe this guy does want to be associated with it. Nope, I'm not jumping to conclusions. I'm not pathologizing someone, especially not someone I've never met. Nope. He would also, from time to time, demand more D&D style paladin powers that just didn't fit with the setting, and DM increasingly put his foot down, making him use whatever gear was there, and giving less of an F about his paladin shtick. Good move. Thank you. Tell people no. He eventually escalated a bar fight into a bloodbath. So it started out with some drunk NPC heckling the party. Yeah. Then the paladin said,
You dare speak to a representative of God like that?
And we all groaned and tried to get him to back off, but the NPC said, You think you're such hot stuff, you and your phony baloney god. I remember looking at DM and shaking my head, and DM just kind of shrugging to kind of say, he's gotta deal with the fallout from his actions. But before we could say anything, he started physically assaulting the NPC, and the NPC fought back. That's what happens when someone attacks you, which gave the paladin his self-defense excuse, no dude, you attacked first. That's not at all how it works. To start blasting and zapping. Multiple people started attacking him, and we as a party kind of collectively decided not to back him up on this one, which we have done the majority of the time when he starts his murder hobo crap. But I get the sense he was expecting us to get roped into this one. Sorry, bro. Nevertheless, he kills like 8 people as he attempts to flee before local protection rackets, gangs, and cops show up and end up shooting him and any other chaotic bar patrons repeatedly, and left them all in a pool of their own blood. The cyberpunk paladin was dead, and his player starts demanding we resurrect him with a spell or a fee. It's cyberpunk, you can't do... And DM has to once again remind him that this isn't D&D, and resurrection doesn't exist. And even in the D&D games he runs, he doesn't allow resurrection generally. To which he just says,
It can be a thing if you make it a thing. Like, maybe a Ripperdoc can be like a cyberpunk version of a necromancer or healer with revivify or resurrection spells.
And DM just responded, no Ripperdoc can fix this, bro. I'm sorry, but you're gonna need to roll a new character. I do love targeted rocks fall, everyone dies. That's pretty good. And he says, actually, I think his voice changes for this point.
This game is bullshit. Why are we willingly playing a TTRPG with no magic? Let's just admit this was a mistake and go back to playing D&D.
But the rest of us were enjoying Cyberpunk Red, so we said, now, no. That's supposed to say no. So he just rage quit after that and said,
fuck this stupid fucking game. There's a reason nobody plays it, guys. Fuck!
And then he stormed off. Tail end. Yeah, that's actually where it ends. Listen, I didn't love Cyberpunk Red the time I played it. I'm more of a Shadowrun girl myself. But, like, it's not that bad. But it's not meant to be a fantasy game. This is... I hate to harp on this, but this is your brain on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Can we go back to the days where, like, as groups we'd be changing the system we play all the time? That was a lot of fun! Apparently not with some of these guys. There's not too much to say here. Like, he wanted to play a lawful stupid murder hobo. And I guess your typical poorly run 5e game, but like, this DM seemed to have a hell of a lot more backbone than that, so tough shit, man. Honestly, you shouldn't ever let this fly in a 5e game either. To be clear, this is bad behavior regardless of the system. You don't get to just go around and murder people left and right because you personally think that they're evil. That isn't how anything works. And I'm glad he got consequences for his actions. But this does go to show the big lesson to take here. Be a lot more willing to tell your players no. It's a simple word, and it has a lot of power. I want to do this thing. No. It's not a fit. Doesn't work here. No, that's not how this particular system works, or how I want this game to run. You can tell players no. And I do hear the counter-argument, oh, but you should let players have fun and do what they want. Yes, but. And there's a big but there. It's gonna make... do we still joke about Kim Kardashian's ass? It's gonna make her jealous. That is not a blanket permission slip to do anything and everything. At the end of the day, the GM should get a large degree of a say in how they want their game and their world to run, as well as the types of RP and story that they want to have in it. They need to have fun too, it's not just you. That's the lesson. Learn to say no. It will be helpful. Which brings us to our second and last story of the day. This one by the user Bristle and Broadsword. It is titled, Main Character Forces DM to play several adventures at the same time, while the other players have to twiddle their thumbs. Aha! Yeah, we're back to the... You know, I'm gonna take main character syndrome over crazy, weird, bigoted losers. This is still bad. Still bad. Still don't do this. But it's better. Tale start. Session 0 and 1. Here are the facts. A few years ago, I ran a Call of Cthulhu campaign. My fellow players took on the roles of a psychiatrist and a private detective. My optimal group size is 2 to 4 players, and at the request of my 2 players, I set out to find a third member for our group. I placed an ad on a German tabletop gaming site and soon received a reply from Mike, the main character of this story. Why does every problem player, like, the name that they make up is my dad's name? My dad's name is Mike. He's not a problem. This is rude to Mikes everywhere. Since we didn't know each other yet, we decided to meet for a coffee to check out the vibe. I liked Mike right away. Oh, okay, cool. He was open and enthusiastic and an experienced role player. Since I had repeatedly had to deal with problem players in the past, I made it clear that I see TTRPGs as a team effort and that it is important to me and to the other players that players and DM work together and everyone has fun. Isn't it Storyteller in Call of Cthulhu? What is it in Call of Cthulhu? I'm gonna check really quick, hang on. Nope, Storyteller's World of Darkness. Call of Cthulhu is the Keeper of Arcane Lore, or just the Keeper. Right. Mike agreed and in turn told a horror story from one of his past games, so everything was fine. Right? Everything was fine. Right? We had a session 0 in which we discussed our expectations and no-goes. The only thing relevant to this story is that we reiterated that we are all in this together, respect each other's time, and play with each other instead of against each other. Everyone agreed. Mike rolled a fortune teller who, through deception and sleight of hand, pretended to have real magical abilities. It was clear that Mike had put a lot of work into this character and was looking forward to sending her on an adventure. Context: Mike is male but plays a female character. To avoid confusion, I will refer to him as he in this story. If you think that I, of all people, have something to say about men playing women or women playing men or anyone, nah, that's fine. This is fine. Here's where it gets crazy. At the beginning of the campaign, all PCs received a letter from an archaeologist who was considered an eccentric outsider in his field. Each PC was acquainted with him in one way or another. In his letter, he wrote of a major discovery that he, for the time being, only wanted to share with people he trusted. He invited the PCs to his current location, a small town in southern Germany, where he and his fourth associate, an old pastor, would be waiting for them. The PCs arrived in town by train, and the psychiatrist and the detective got to know each other right away. This is where I may have messed up. The PCs knew about each other, but had no other connection to each other. In all my years as a keeper, this had never been a problem, and obviously it wasn't for the psychiatrist and the detective either. But if I had determined that the characters were more familiar with each other in some way at the beginning, the following situation might have been avoided. No, I'm just gonna pause here. It is not your fault if one player decides to just ignore the entire concept of playing a team game. Anyway, while the two were talking about the extremely mysterious letter from the archaeologist and discussing what their first step would be, Mike joined them briefly, asked something like, "Are you here because of the archaeologist's letter?" They both wait, she's German. "Are you here because of the archaeologist's letter?" I can't do a German accent, man. I'm just not gonna. They both answered in the affirmative, whereupon Mike said, "Well, that's good to know. I have to go now." And he left. He said to me as the keeper, he wanted to go to the church. Okay, I know I have German viewers. Forgive me. The psychiatrist and the detective set off without Mike's character to check into the hotel where the archaeologist was supposed to be waiting for them, only to discover that he had not been in his room for 5 days. With clever roleplay and a good dice roll, the detective gained access to the room and discovered a torn-out page of a diary in the trash can. Here the PCs read that he had purchased a copy of an occult book, which is why they were hunting him, and had already murdered his friend, the old pastor. More clues were suspected in the pastor's apartment. Meanwhile, Mike arrived at the church office, where he met the new pastor. Mike, not knowing that he had the wrong guy in front of him, tried to find out the whereabouts of the archaeologist. When he finally learned that the old pastor was dead, he said goodbye and started his shopping tour. The first thing he asked me was whether there was a photographer in town. During my preparations for the campaign, I learned that there actually is a photographer in the city in question who has been active since the early 1920s, so I was happy to include him in the adventure. Oh, that's cool. I love when you get that kind of real-world research and it can come up. Excellent. Mike asked the photographer about magnesium and potassium permanganate? I don't know what that is. I'm not a chemist and only have a slight knowledge of photography, so I asked Mike what he was planning to do. His answer was, "You'll see." Not cool, but I let it be. Next, he asked if there was an esoteric shop in town. I wasn't sure if there were such shops in Germany in the 20s, so I asked him again, "What exactly are you planning?" Mike again grinned broadly and replied, "You'll see." This time, I didn't let it go. Yeah, man, you can't be cagey to the person running the game. They need to know what you're doing. Me. Don't you think that as the keeper, I should know what you're planning? Mike. No. Me. Why not? Mike. I have a surprise for you. Me. I hate surprises. Short silence. Me. Listen. I'm the keeper. I'm not playing against you. I'm playing with you. We are all on the same team, and if you tell me what you're planning ahead of time, I can do a better job of preparing, which in turn will give you a better chance of success. I can't possibly memorize the entire inventory of every single store, and I have no idea what the properties of every single chemical are. If I know what the end result is that you want, I can prepare something. So, what do you say? Ooh, I gotta change his voice for this. Mike. Okay. I want to slip the pastor opium and then intimidate him with a light and smoke show to learn what happened to the old parson. Is that even what opium's made of? Hang on. No, obviously the chemicals there are for the light and smoke show. Okay, where's he getting the opium from? What? Also, at this point, photography's been around for 100 years. You're not gonna scare someone with flash photography in the 1920s. They're used to it. This plan is very stupid. I let Mike do as he pleased. Fortunately, the other two PCs used Mike's shopping trip to talk to the young priests themselves and obtain the keys to his deceased colleague's apartment. Since I wanted to reunite the group, I constructed the scene so that Mike saw the other two PCs coming out of the church office and opening a door across the street. They invited him to search the apartment with them. Yeah, right, come on, that's what you want. But Mike declined. While the two were going through the old priest's belongings and discovered a clue about catacombs running under the city, Mike prepared his light and smoke show. It's flash photography, man. Again. Long story short, Mike slipped some opium. Okay. Where did he get opium? I'm still stuck on this. Where did he get opium? You don't just have that. Mike slipped some opium into the priest's wine, lit incense sticks, and blinded him with several rounds of flash powder while pretending to be the devil. This is a very stupid plan. The pastor was terrified and hid under his desk. Sure, Mike's extensive preparations and masterful intimidation check did not change the fact that the pastor knew absolutely nothing about the circumstances of his predecessor's death or the whereabouts of the archaeologist. Realizing that he couldn't get any information out of the priest, Mike broke one of the windows with a chair and jumped from the first floor, drawing a thick cloud of smoke behind him and accompanied by the panicked screams of the pastor. Right, European first floor, for Americans, that's the second floor. Perhaps this is a good opportunity to mention that it was broad daylight and the church was located in the middle of the city center, in front of a large square where dozens of people were milling around at the time. The crowd screamed, and immediately the whistle of a police patrol sounded, loudly ordering Mike to stop. When I saw the look on Mike's face, I suddenly realized what kind of player I had in front of me. Mike must have pulled off such stunts before, and the fact that he was suddenly dealing with the police was probably the first time he had been confronted with the consequences of his actions. Yay! Oh, I love consequences for stupidity. I have a story on that. I'll hang on to it. At the time, there was a festival in town. Excellent. There was a festival in town, and I decided that he had the chance to hide in a group of costumed people. His role was a success, and he got away. Ah, damn. Since this was Mike's first adventure with our group, I didn't want to let him rot in jail for the rest of the session. Oh, you should have. Oh well. But I hoped that he would take this as a warning shot. It turned out that my expectations would be disappointed. The psychiatrist and detective had since found a city guide who told them that there was access to the catacombs under one of the local breweries. Most of the tunnels were not open to the public, but a small part was accessible for guided tours. A little unsure of what to do next, Mike wandered through the streets, and I decided that he saw the other two PCs waiting at a bus stop to get to the brewery. Mike turned away from them and walked on. At this point, the psychiatrist's player let out an audible sigh. I asked, "Are you sure?" Players, pay attention. If a GM asks you, "Are you sure?" that means what you're doing is stupid, and you should think about it. Mike thought about it for a moment, and then finally decided to approach them. Thank you. He even offered to drive them to the brewery since he was the only one in the group who had a car. The rest of the adventure, the group worked together. They talked to the old, demented brewmaster, gained access to the catacombs, wandered through the darkness, and finally overpowered a cultist who was waiting for them in an altar room. By the way, the catacombs are a real-life place, but there is not a hidden shrine to a hungry god down there. Yeah, at least I hope so. Hey, Germans, can you fact-check that for me? If there's any catacombs you know of with altars to hungry gods, just let me know. Here the PCs found not only the occult book, but also the archaeologist, who was injured, dehydrated, but still alive and tied up in a corner, ready to give the PCs answers to their questions. In the next session. After the session, we talked about the adventure as a group. We also talked to Mike, and the two players said that they had only accepted the offer of a ride for meta reasons because they wanted the adventure to continue as a group. I explained that it was difficult for me to have to lead two adventures at the same time. We told Mike, and we meant it, that we would like to continue playing with him, but that his character should work to gain the group's trust after he had previously constantly avoided them. Mike, man, they covered this in Session 0. That's the point of the Session 0. You're supposed to take that, internalize it, and then act upon it. Not this. What do you mean that was only Session 1? Oh no. Session 2. The detective player brought a friend for the second session. She played a journalist and received a letter similar to the others before the start. The in-game reason why she couldn't participate in the first adventure was that her train just did not arrive on time. The cliché of the punctual German does not apply to public transport. I thought German public transport was really good. Oh no, that's the... Never mind. The adventure more or less started where the last one left off. The PCs took the archaeologist to a hospital. Good. He reported that he had been searching for a long time for a lost temple of an ancient god and had found clues to its location in the occult tome of unspeakable cults. He asked the PCs to watch the book while he was in the hospital. The PCs were made aware of the book's absolute importance for the rest of the plot. Mike immediately tried to convince the group to let him watch the book. Since the group had absolutely no reason to trust Mike's character, they declined. Mike tried a persuasion roll on the psychiatrist, but I immediately forbade it, so Mike conceded. For now. The group went to the hotel where everyone had their own room prepaid by the archaeologist. That's nice of him. The PCs went to bed, but Mike's character stayed up late. Long after midnight, he left his room and crept to the psychiatrist's door. He picked the lock with a lockpick, rummaged through her stuff, took the book, and disappeared again. I made Mike roll the dice with every damn step. When he picked the lock, when he crept through the room, when he rummaged through the suitcase, and when he left the room again. Mike made every roll. He went in and out like a shadow. The psychiatrist's player sat there with an annoyed expression on her face the whole time. She started to ask why, but then stayed in character and held back the question. The journalist's player was visibly confused. Then, instead of going back to his room, he left the hotel and went off in the middle of the night to look for another one. He found a cheap motel, checked in, and hid the book behind a radiator. Only then did he go to bed. I'd give him points for having a plan if it wasn't so stupid. The next morning, the PCs, minus Mike, sat at the breakfast table, explained the events so far to the journalist, and planned their next move. Of course, they quickly realized that both Mike and the book had disappeared. Although the players knew what had happened, the PCs suspected that Mike had been kidnapped along with the book, just as the archaeologist had been. They began to discuss how they could free him. I wondered briefly how far the group would go to track down Mike and prepare to rescue him from the clutches of a dangerous cult. I was sure that at least one of the players would see this through to the bitter end. I, however, had had enough. The session had only lasted 20 minutes, and I was already forced to improvise a second bullshit adventure because Mike had planned another solo trip. There was no way I was going to let the PCs go on a mini-adventure when their players actually knew it was going to be a wild goose chase. So I asked Mike, now in a decidedly sterner tone than in the last session, why are you doing this after all the conversations we've had before? He tried to play dumb at first, but I kept badgering him until he finally uttered the wonderful sentence. Say it with me. That's what my character would do. Oh, the cry of assholes everywhere. I said, great, there's a super easy solution for that. Mike, what's that? Me, can't you just play a character who acts less like a selfish asshole and who is interested in working with the rest of the group? Mike, well, I guess so. Me, great, we don't even have to change your character sheet for that. So let's go. Oh, I like this GM, they're fun. Mike's character went to the hotel where he arrived at the breakfast table just in time and told the characters a wild story of cultists who had entered the hotel at night and had stolen the book. He had chased them down, killed them, and brought the book back safely. I let him have it. I wouldn't have, but... The rest of the adventure went by with almost no further escapades on Mike's part. But of course, he tried to make off with the book one more time, to which I simply responded with a brief, no. Hey! Someone learned the lesson I was teaching in the last story. I love it when that works out. At the end of the session, when everyone had left and I was home alone again, I thought long and hard about the last two adventures. At this point in my role-playing career, I had reached a point where my tolerance for problem players was very low. I had already had to deal with all sorts of that guy-isms. I had a creep at the table who just didn't realize that the female players were disgusted by him rather than charmed by his advances. I had several players who were up to 2 hours late without giving notice. I had players who, even after 3 years, didn't have their own rulebook, and even after all this time, still had to ask how to make a simple attack roll. Okay, not having your own rulebooks, that one's more understandable. Not everybody can just go out and buy books easily. But the rest of it is, yeah, very stupid. Apart from IRL violence, I've seen just about every kind of nonsense a GM can endure. As a result, I often planned and ran the campaigns out of a twisted sense of duty, rather than because I really enjoyed it. Every time I picked up the pen to work out an NPC or draw a dungeon, I wanted to puke because the only thought in my head was what kind of crap that guy would pull this time. And I'd finally had enough. The next day, I discussed the situation with the other players, and we all agreed that Mike's BS was going too far, and there was no coming back. So I took my phone and sent Mike a voicemail explaining that he was no longer invited to the next session. The reason for this is that his constant solo escapades, in which he doesn't seem to give a shit whether the other players are having fun or not. Also, he doesn't seem to be able to get rid of that stupid player versus GM mentality. We love a GM with some agency. This is so refreshing in these stories to see someone just take the initiative. And that took care of the problem. The journalist fit in wonderfully with the group, and we had a year-long campaign that took the PCs from Germany to Austria, from there to Cairo, to the city without a name, and back to Germany, from where they flew on an airship through a portal to the other world and punched the BBEG in the face with an umbrella. Can you do that? I mean, I guess most of the enemies that you face are cultists. I was just, in my head, I was picturing, like, some plucky reporter girl going up to Nyarlathotep and just hitting them over the head with an umbrella. Or, like, the King in Yellow? I don't think you're walking out of those. Definitely cultists. Dear Mike, which isn't really your name. Yeah, because Mike is my dad's name, and he's a wonderful man. I love him, okay? Should you read this, I think you're a great guy. When I had coffee with you, I got really good vibes from you, and you definitely put a lot of heart into creating your characters. That's wonderful. But I hope that in the time that has passed since our game, you have learned that you are not the only player in an RPG session, and that the other people in the game also want a moment in the spotlight and to enjoy their time at the table. Wherever you are now, I hope you have found a group where you can have fun and bring just as much fun to your fellow players. Tail end. I echo all of that. Ooh, okay, right. So, story of the consequences of my own stupidity. So, okay, in one of my Pathfinder games that I'm playing, I was playing a medium named Estrella, and in the most recent session, she tragically died because in the secret villain lab that we had all discovered, we found these mystery chemicals in giant vats and people being experimented on, the typical crazy villain scientist stuff. And we decided, we need to blow this whole place up. So we piled a bunch of other barrels near those tanks and cut them open so the green goop in them was just spilling everywhere. I didn't say this was a smart decision. In fact, I kind of said the opposite. But anyway, as we're interrogating this villain, and she's doing her monologue, and we manage to convince her, hey, this is stupid, what you're doing is evil and messed up, and she starts to come around to our arguments and see our side, there's an explosion. It's time to run. Now the problem here is that I was wearing heavy armor, so I was slower than everyone by a lot. About halfway in, I realized, there is no way I'm getting out of this alive. And yeah, I died. I died in a massive explosion, though I did save one of the other characters in the process, so it wasn't a complete loss. I guess the difference is, I looked at it and I was like, this is basically entirely my fault, and I had no problems with the death because I earned it. That's on me. Mike here, on the other hand, along with most of this type of problem person, the first time they're ever faced with the consequences of their actions, they don't know what to do. They stand there like a deer in the headlights, like they're staring down at a train, barreling at them, and they can't even think of jumping out of the way. So they double down, so they try to justify things. They try to say, wait, no, that's stupid. I wasn't intending to stand on a train track, after building the train track and fueling the train and sending it right towards themselves. I guess my point is, be like this GM. They were very good. This was a good way to handle someone who's just being a problem, the first thing you do is you give them consequences, and if they keep repeating the behavior that you don't like, you give them an ultimatum. And if they keep repeating the behavior, just get rid of them. It's not worth it. I'm not going to repeat the adage. You all know it. Instead, I'm just going to say, good job, Bristle and Broadsword. You did excellent. Honestly, if I was German, I'm not, sorry. If my accents earlier weren't proof enough, I would love to play in a game of yours. They sound incredible, especially with the amount of research and preparation that goes into them. That's amazing. I love you. I've never met you, but I love you. Keep doing what you're doing, and don't lose hope, because there's players out there who will be delighted to be in that sort of game, to play with someone like you who gives a shit. Like, it's good to find. And hey, if you're sick of GMing, you could always take a turn at the player's seat. It's fun to swap. Okay. That's it. We're done. We're done. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all the YouTube things. You're familiar with them. Huge shout out, thank you, all of the great, best, good stuff to all of my Patreon supporters. They are wonderful and amazing, and you should, I don't know, worship the ground they walk on as they are gods among humans. Yeah, we're gonna go with that. Just don't try to play a paladin to them in a cyberpunk game. That's not how cyberpunk works, as we learned today. As always, feel free to join the Discord server to talk with me and others about the most recent video, about upcoming videos, about all sorts of things. Give me your suggestions, your stories. You know how it do be. It's a Discord server. You're probably in, statistically speaking, like 50 already, and you've got like 37 or 38, 45 of them fully muted, and you never check them. That's just how Discord works. And you know what? I long to be the 46th one that you have muted and never look at. What a goal. Alright. Bye.